Hi, everybody. It's wonderful having you here. I want to thank you all for joining us. Very important topic. I want to thank all of our partners. And I want to definitely introduce and thank our wonderful presenters for being here. Gerard, Filitti from Lawfare and the EndJewHatred movement. Ian Halperin, who was the incredible director of the documentary many of you have watched, I believe, wish you weren't here. And he's also an award-winning New York Times selling author. And Lana Melman, who has also written an incredible book, Artists Under Fire, and she'll be here if you're in the Atlanta area with us on July 31st. So make sure you join us for that. Let me start by asking you, Ian. We've had the opportunity, thankfully, to watch your documentary. Many of us have. And I was wondering how you got started and why you decided on Roger Waters.
It's a very good question. I just remember one day I was driving in Los Angeles and I heard Waters on the radio giving an interview saying that Israel was worse than Nazi Germany. And literally, being the son of a Holocaust survivor, my father hid in a hole when he was 6 years old for several years, and his whole family died beside him of starvation. Hearing Waters make such false and egregious statements, I almost literally drove off a cliff. I couldn't believe somebody would make such outrageous false statements, especially somebody of the stature of Waters, who was the former leader of Pink Floyd for so many years. And having done further research later, I realized just how racist and how prejudicial Waters was against the state of Israel. Now, it's fair to criticize Israel. You could criticize its policy. You could criticize all kinds of things there. But, you know, if Waters was so concerned about oppression in the Mideast, I mean, why wasn't he going after Iraq, Iran, Syria? Israel by far is the most progressive nation in that region. I mean, gay rights, women's rights, they honor. You have over 2 million Israeli Arabs living there. He called it apartheid, and that's so false. You know, again, I'm very familiar, having been very involved in the anti-apartheid movement when I was young. And for, you know, it's completely different. Apartheid was a two-class state. And Israel is not like that at all. And Waters, by going around the world and saying all these false, malicious statements against Israel and the Jewish people, I find it repulsive that he's able to get away with it even on this current tour. Because let's face it, if Waters was up there in a white sheet calling for African Americans to be calling them out and, you know, condoning the KKK, his tour would stop on the first concert date. So the question I still pose after doing the film and meeting with leaders all over the world, including Pope Francis is in the film, and Tony Blair, and all kinds of people in Israel. Why is Waters still able to have this voice and get away with it? It's just astounding. And, you know, I applaud people like Lana, who's works day in and day out fighting Waters and and the BDS and the boycott Waters calls for the artists of Israel, which is just repulsive. But why is he able to get away with this still? Because nobody else would get away with this. And for some reason, because he's the third highest grossing tour ever, the Stones and U2 are #1 and 2, and Waters is #3. And it all boils down to money. And that's why the promoters and the owners of the venues continue to let him have this just false voice.
Now, are you coming out with a second documentary on the topic? I'm sure there's been a lot more that's happened since your first one was released, and you've put a tremendous effort. Anyone who's watched the documentary can see that you put a tremendous effort into just telling it from a pure, it seems very neutral to me. Like you're just presenting the facts. This is what he said. This is what people who are being interviewed think of what he's saying, and this is why it is or isn't correct. Will there be follow-up?
Well, first of all, in Waters' case, to deny the truth, Cheryl, it doesn't make the truth go away. And Waters, I mean, again, there's three types of people in life: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who don't know what happened. And Waters has no idea what happened, especially in this case. I am working on further stuff more about contemporary anti-Semitism, because if you look what's going on in the world today, after World War II, there were 4.9 million Jews left in Europe. Today, there's less than 2 million Jews left in Europe. And 1 million of those are in Russia. 250,000 were in Ukraine, and now that's gone down, the numbers, because of what's going on over there. And then the Jews are just scattered all over the place in the UK and Germany and Italy, Spain, a paucity of Jews. And it's alarming because Jews are such an integral part of European culture, and they're just being driven out by contemporary anti-Semitism. And Roger Waters is certainly at the forefront here of creating hatred and bias and prejudice and violence against Jews. And in my opinion, again, it's shameful. It's atrocious. But then again, they could try to drive us all out. There could be one Jew left in Europe, but I guarantee you, we'll just come back bigger and stronger than ever. That's our history. And unfortunately, we've had to deal with this from the beginning of time. But again, just focusing on the subject at hand with Roger Waters, this is very serious stuff, folks. And I don't think a lot of people who go to his concerts, many of them Jews, have no idea about what he's espousing and the hatred he's creating and the contemporary anti-Semitism he's creating, especially on campus with the BDS. He supports BDS. He's one of the leaders of BDS. And kids are afraid to go to school because they're being attacked.
That's absolutely true. And I appreciate all that you've done. I want you to know that there actually have been people who've contacted me since we started advertising this, saying that they refused to go to his concert, that they had no idea. And much of that is seeing your documentary. So thank you for helping get that out.
No, thank you, and keep up the great work. Thank you for having this important event today. Thank you.
And I'm thrilled to say that you've been able to secure another week, right, where people could still watch it?
Yes, I will. My distributor will create the code tomorrow, and they'll give you another week. And so I'll be in touch with you tomorrow by email, and you could distribute the new code.
You're incredible. So if you're watching, by all means, please share this information with your friends, with your families, with your colleagues. people need to understand what's going on out there. And I guess this leads me to a question for Gerard. Why is it that this man can say whatever he wants publicly, but others can't scream fire in a theater, or our freedom of speech is somewhat limited when it comes to that, but he can incite violence against the Jews and Zionists. He can slander, he can libel, he can cause all sorts of hate and hostility, and nothing has been done to him legally.
Well, that's a great question, Cheryl, and there's a lot to unpack, but let me back up a step and go to what BDS is. It's easy to think of it or just dismiss it as anti-Semitic and Jew hatred, which it absolutely is. But BDS is targeted discrimination. It's discrimination against the Jewish people. It's a discrimination against Israelis based on their ethnicity. It's something that's prohibited by most laws in pretty much any jurisdiction that I can think of. It's discriminatory. It's not just this artsy movement that people like Roger Waters pursue or push. It's not just about the underlying lies that that make up this movement. BDS is discrimination, pure and simple. So when we're talking about discrimination, we're talking about anti-discrimination measures. We're talking about legal remedies. That's why so many states, more than 30 states in the US, have passed anti-BDS laws that prohibit implementing BDS. And this starts going to the answer to your question, which is there's a big difference between words, between speech, and between conduct. Speech is protected, whether it's in the US or in Canada or in European jurisdictions, Australia, even Israel. There is some universal concept that most speech is allowed to be made. It's protected. So saying that you believe Israel to be an apartheid state, as appalling as that is, as hateful as that is, you can say that. But what you can't do is you can't act on that. You can't discriminate against people based on that statement, based on that belief. So we have this dichotomy in the legal system where it's permitted to say these hateful things. It's permitted to go out there and fly a pig and call Israelis Nazis. In the US, that's freedom of speech. We may not like it, we may not be comfortable with it, but the answer to speech, to bad speech, is good speech. This is where we have to make our case. This is where we have to contribute as lawyers, as advocates, as private citizens. This is why the EndJewHatred movement exists, to combat this discrimination, this hatred, this Jew hatred. But when you actually talk about implementing BDS, when you talk about not doing business with an Israeli company, when you talk about not allowing your Israeli distributor to continue selling Ben & Jerry's ice cream because you don't like their policies, the Israeli government's policies, that conduct is illegal in a lot of jurisdictions. And even where it's not, it's still subject to the same test. Is it discriminatory? So that's where the dichotomy is. And the problem with speech, it's easy to think that in Europe and in some places, some speech is prohibited. Hate speech is a concept that is not in the Western, and when I say Western, I mean west of the Atlantic Ocean mentality. It's something that comes more from Europe and from the experiences of the the wars and the violence and the decimation of the population there. They have laws there that categorize speech and say that some things are so beyond the pale that you cannot say them. You cannot incite hatred. You cannot say things that are anti-Semitic or that target minorities. And perhaps, for those countries that they work. In the American mentality and the Canadian mentality, we don't have that. We have, more or less an absolute right to speech, and we are loath to change that. So what we can do is we can make this kind of speech unacceptable socially. And this is why, this is why I'm a proud supporter of the EndJewHatred movement. Now, EndJewHatred is a grassroots movement. It unites people from around the world who support the cause that defines the movement, ending Jew hatred in our lifetime. It does so by altering public discourse to make Jew hatred unacceptable in society, empowering Jews with positivity and strength. How do we make it unacceptable? Let's look at Black Lives Matter. Let's look at Stop Asian Hate. Let's look at all the minority LGBTQIA+ movements. They were very successful in making it socially unacceptable to be bigoted or racist. You can't go down the streets nowadays in any city and yell epithets that are racial in nature, not because it's illegal, but it's because it's socially unacceptable. It has consequences. You are called out as a racist, you lose your job, your friends shun you. There are consequences to having that kind of hatred. And that's what we need to do in Canada, in the US, in countries where free speech is very much the law of the land. We have to put social pressure to change this, to change behavior. So Roger Waters, when he engages in conduct by refusing to go to Israel, that may be discriminatory. But the vile things that he says, they're not really actionable. You can't sue him for making up lies about Israel. But what you can do is you can do what he's calling for. You cannot give him your business. You cannot support him. You can protest outside of his venue. You can make it socially unacceptable for him to be saying these things. And that's kind of the limits of the law. When BDS comes into play, when it's implemented, when people boycott, that's illegal because it's discriminatory. But when we're talking about speech, then we have to talk about social action. We have to talk about pressure. And that's something that we all need to think about, how we can contribute to that movement.
Thank you. What about the harassment, Lana, that artists get from him and his followers when they want to perform in Israel or participate in Israel? I would think that that would be something that, he'd get pushed back on, no?
It's interesting that you raise that point, because that's exactly what I was thinking about when Gerard was speaking. In fact, he personally harasses artists. He says slanderous things about them, that they are supporting apartheid, human rights violations, war crimes. He singles them out. He does it in the public square. And I would like to turn that back to Gerard and say, isn't that a good case if we could get an artist who is willing to speak out about that and bring a suit? The other thing is, to my knowledge, there's no slander against a country. You can't be held to libel and slander causes of action for slandering an entire nation. So it's really about the individual. And what he does is monstrous. His intent is to demonize the Israeli Jews. And when we talk about Israel, in the world perception, we're talking about Jews. Most people don't even realize that Jews only comprise 75% of the population. We know it's the Jewish homeland. So he so demonizes them as to make them become dehuman in the eyes of the public, which makes it much more legitimate for the public to feel righteous about calling for its elimination. I don't think this is accidental. I don't remotely believe he's ignorant. I think he's coming from a very bad place. I have seen the progression that he has made. He didn't start out in 2006 supporting the boycott. His response then was the same as what most artists say today, which is, I might not agree with the policies of a particular government, but I'm not going to punish the entire people. I'm not going to color them all with the same brush. And now that exact same explanation coming from other artists makes him accuse them of hellacious motives. So he's doing a tremendous amount of damage. And another interesting thing about him, he is focusing on the cultural boycott. He does not speak about an economic boycott or even so much about an academic boycott. And I think that's because he realizes the unique power of the cultural boycott to spread lies across the world. Any story about a celebrity is newsworthy. So when you target your animosity and your hatred and your calls for a boycott against an artist, that makes news. So all of the news publications repeat BDS's accusations. They're false accusations against Israel. whether or not the boycott campaign is successful. And I think it's very important to underscore that the boycott campaign, in terms of achieving boycotts, has not been successful. Where it has been very successful is poisoning hearts and minds across the globe because of the constant repetition of lies about Israel and as being demonic, monstrous people capable of horrendous evil. And that is the source of his strength. And he gets away with it because he's Roger Waters. And I think his motive for it is self-aggrandizement. He likes being in the center of attention. He sees himself as the second coming, saving the world. And he's projecting himself as a leader in this anti-Semitic Jew hatred cause.
Thank you. Ian, I know you followed his career quite a bit and the things you've said. Would you say that his former bandmates in Pink Floyd are on board with his thoughts from everything that you got, or what sort of feedback did you get there?
Absolutely not. In fact, I know that some of his bandmates think why is he so obsessed with Israel? And why, if he's so concerned about human rights violations, why isn't he targeting Russia, China, Iraq, Iran, Syria? Why is just the focus on the Jews? And there's a lot to Roger Waters, again, that people don't realize how day in and day out, he's just trying to spew hatred against the most democratic place in the Mideast. Again, Israel acknowledges women's rights, gay rights. There's Arabs in the Knesset. By calling it apartheid, I mean, that's horrendous. But by saying it's worse than Nazi Germany, quote unquote, he has said that as the son of a Holocaust survivor. I am deeply offended by that. In the memory of over 6 million innocent people who were murdered, he should not be able to get away with that. And again, if he was on stage with a white sheet calling for the re-enslavement of African Americans, his tour would be shut down. He wouldn't make it to concert number 2. So yes, there is a First Amendment, but what he's saying it goes way beyond that. And for some reason, there's one set of rules for everyone. And then when it comes to the Jews, it's just, and you can say anything you want about them and get away with it. And that's what we're living in. And we have to look much deeper than just the laws and the society we're living in. We have to look at the acts of contemporary anti-Semitism that unfortunately are permeating the Western world. If you look at what happened in Pittsburgh, what happened in New Jersey, what happened in the UK has but 1,500 violent acts of anti-Semitism a year. They're first in Europe. Germany's number 2. France, despite, and unfortunately, I was there for Charlie Hebdo and I was there for the Bataclan, covering both. Something I really do not want to relive, again, being the son of a Holocaust survivor, it's not pleasant having to see this happen, contemporary anti-Semitism. And France in the last few years has really taken more action to decrease the number of acts of anti-Semitism, despite Charlie Hebdo and Bataclan. But folks, we got to stand up. And yes, a lot of people text me all the time, well, there's Jewish owners like Tannenbaum and of all these stadiums that Water's playing in. Well, most likely these people have family that were in the Holocaust. And, you know, I remember during anti-apartheid movement, which I was very involved in and at the forefront, the only way to do it was to really call people out and to really not not let them play Sun City, and but for Waters to try to dissuade artists from going to Israel, the most democratic place in the Mideast, I really think we have to take him on legally at this point in the name of 6 million innocent people who were murdered, because the egregious statement and completely false to say that Israel is worse than Nazi Germany. I don't think anybody should be able to get away with that.
I couldn't agree more. And so I guess you brought up Tannenbaum, and there were some questions about what happened in Toronto and the statement that was made by the owner of the concert venue. Does anyone on the panel have more information about that they'd like to share? I believe he said he'd donate money that went to the concert.
Look, it's all smoke and mirror. To be honest with you, I have to say this. This is smoke and mirror. This would have never been tolerated during South Africa anti-apartheid movement. This is Thatcher at its finest. I mean, a Mandela wouldn't tolerate that. Why should this is, just makeup to appease everyone. All these people who are giving Waters a stage to attack the Jews, just because you're Jewish, it doesn't mean you're exempt from anti-Semitism. You don't get a free pass, folks. And I'm sorry, anybody who is facilitating this in any way has got to be called out and held accountable.
Thank you. I agree. We have a tremendous amount of questions from people in the audience right now, and anyone who's watching, you're welcome to ask some more. So I'm just going to read them out, and whoever feels that they want to answer, please do. First one is, can anyone name any country or state that one believes is perfect? Has Water ever identified any state he believes is perfect?
Well, actually, I don't know. I don't think I've heard that. But a couple of things. I wanted to say that to my knowledge, his previous bandmate, Nick Mason, has in fact joined him in numerous open letters endorsing BDS and attacking artists who are scheduled to go there. David Gilmour is far less active, but I would not say he is necessarily outspoken against BDS. I'd also like to tender a different opinion about the Larry Tannenbaum situation, where we have heard that he has taken his profits and are donating it to his charities in Israel, and I don't know much more about it than that. I would invite people to take that as a positive sign. This goes back to Gerard's comment about shame and the feeling that Larry felt compelled to distance himself with Roger. Do I agree about the basic premise that everyone's saying, and how disheartening it is that Jews do not stand up for Israel? I find it very disheartening. But that is the basis of, it's a sign that we are making headway when we speak out against Roger Waters. We're making it socially uncomfortable to do that. And that's one of the things I observed when I first got involved in fighting the cultural boycott campaign. That's the first step, that artists who ended up supporting BDS or backing down or ultimately not wanting to go there again, was that they'd make a gesture of supporting Palestinian, what I don't think that Roger Waters, I think he's anti-Palestinian. I've never seen anything or heard of anything that he's done to help them in their lives. All of his energy is focused on advocating for the elimination of Israel. But these artists, one of the first things they do is to try to show that they are aware of public sentiment, is to donate their proceeds. And a lot of times, and I think the best way to do that is to do it towards peace, any kind of collaboration and efforts for getting along. But I think it's a great sign that he did that. And if these concert venues and promoters are feeling compelled, and more of them feel compelled to give away their profits, well, where do you think that goes? Why would you host this if it taints you, if you feel it taints you to have participated and profited from this? I say good.
I'm going to jump in and split the baby between Ian and Lana on this. I think that this is a good start. For many years, we had business owners, venue owners, promoters who were unwilling to even listen to the discussion and didn't care that they were allowing this anti-Semitism, this Jew hate within their venues. Now that they're listening and starting to give money back, it's a start, but it's not enough. I mean, we need to put an end to it. We need them to stand up and say, we won't give these people a stage. We won't let Jew hate be spread in our venues. That's where we need to get to. But I do think that this is a start, and that we're doing better in that regard. And just going back to something that was said before, sitting here as a lawyer, I keep listening to you guys speaking. I'm thinking, you know what, there might be something to be said about going after Roger Waters for basically interfering with the businesses of other artists when they are, basically being threatened, cajoled, and presented with loss of revenue by his actions in when they want to go and perform in Israel, or where they want to be supportive of Israel. So I would love to speak to artists who have been exposed to this, because I think that is a fight worth having, and it's a very timely one. So I think there is something there, and it's something to look into.
I agree. And I think also musician unions might be people that we can approach that might be willing to join into this, lawsuit. And I have to tell you, the boycott campaign is not popular among artists, and it's not popular among the people who represent artists, agents, and managers. Nobody sees this as a plus. For number one, for ethical reasons, which is artists see themselves as bridging cultural divides. They see themselves as appealing to the universality in us. And then all of their managers and agents and the people behind that, of course, don't appreciate the loss of a venue. And you have this anvil hanging over your head. Why stop at Israel? Why stop there? If we empower people who complain, and we're talking about what started off as a tiny minority to complain, where does that stop? Artists don't want, what's key to artists is freedom to create, but also freedom to distribute. They want audiences all over the world to hear their music and to see their films and to be touched by their art. So this is an artist, anti-audience, anti-peace movement. And I think there's a good chance we could get some support.
Oh, I'm on board. So Someone asked, with all of Waters' lies, misinformation, calls to violence, how come he's still out on social media sites like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc., when sites like Babylon Bee and Libs of TikTok are pushed off?
Sounds like Gerard. Question for Gerard.
Gerard?
Would you like the truthful answer or the cynical one?
How about you give us both?
Aren't they the same?
His name is not Donald Trump. The answer is what he's done is not it's speech, but he pushes the limits without crossing the line, because quite frankly, in the US, the standards are pretty high. And Twitter and Facebook and social media platforms are not known for their support of the Jewish community. They're known for rampant anti-Semitism. They're known for having the voices of terrorists on them and the voices of the Iranian government, not for voices that combat hatred. So it should not be surprising that he is thriving on social media when other voices are cut. And that again goes to the fact that these are private entities to which, quite frankly, the First Amendment doesn't even apply. It's a business decision for Twitter. It's a business decision for Facebook whether they want to have these voices on their platforms. And they've decided essentially that they want to endorse these messages of hate by allowing them to continue. And unfortunately, then this may change with congressional action in the US. Right now, we have nothing that we can do other than put economic pressure on these companies to change their practices, because they are pretty much immune from review or legal action for their decisions to deplatform people. So essentially, we are in a limbo of legislation that was created when no one really knew what the internet was. But voices like Roger Waters continue to be heard while the Jewish community continues to be silenced online. And that is a disparity that we have to fight with social pressure and to get new laws in place to allow better control and regulation over these internet providers.
Thank you. Someone mentioned, why were there interviews with Naomi Klein and Norm Chomsky on Al Jazeera profiled without any context? I think this could be confusing as to the uninformed viewer who does not know they are arguing a stance that is anti-Israel.
I think most people don't need an introduction to those two people and know that they're anti-Israel. And again, in the context of contemporary anti-Semitism, unfortunately, there's so many voices against Israel and the Jewish people. Roger Waters is not alone. So in the film, I just felt it was important to balance things out and show other people who of notoriety who are also criticizing Israel.
Thank you. Is anything being done about Alice Walker, who is also promoting BTS and trying to coerce artists?
When Alice Walker, yes, she's one of the few Americans artists that advocate for BDS. She's not completely alone. There are other American artists who are Israel bashers, meaning that they demonize Israel, but they don't actually call to boycott it. And yes, she has. And in particular, one of the things she did is that she did not allow her very famous and really fabulous book, The Color Purple, to be translated into Hebrew. She also, when Alicia Keys was scheduled to perform in Israel on 4th of July, I think it was 2013 or 14, she became very outspoken. She published an open letter appealing to Alicia Keys as her soul sister and asking her to support the boycott. What I did at the time, I was working with other members of the entertainment industry, and we reached out, and I worked with Ben Silverman, who is a wonderful, extraordinary advocate for Israel. He's the former CEO of NBC, and he produced things like Ugly Betty and The Office. So he's an incredibly successful producer. And we lobbied for him to be able to write a counter piece. Oh, it was published, her letter was published in BET, which is Black Entertainment Television, which reaches a very urban audience. And that audience was asked to vote based on Alice Walker's letter, whether or not Alicia should go to Israel. So we interjected, we asked if we could present a counter viewpoint. She allowed it. The executive director of BET, and it was published, and the poll skewed back radically. So initially it was very much in favor of the boycott, and having this other information out there changed the results of the poll. But yes, but she's also discredited a little bit because she's supports some weird, wacky conspiracy theories by, I forget his first name, but his last name is Icky. So yes, she's one of the few people, and she does have weight because she's a bit of an icon in the Black community. And I understand that based upon her novel, The Color Purple.
Thank you. Has anyone seen any open debates with Roger Waters? Has he offered to do that with anyone? Or does he just basically spread lies and hate?
I have not seen an open debate. I see him in comfortable surroundings where he is surrounded by acolytes. I have to be thankful to one of my colleagues who forwarded me an article that he was on an online forum just the other day supporting students at McGill University engaging in BDS activities. And I understand why he doesn't want to debate. He's an idiot. I mean, the things that come out of his mouth, and I have to quote this because I was just amused by it. At the turn of the millennium, I had no idea really what was going on. I thought, Israel, isn't that people in sandals going around and, farming? And aren't they socialists? This is what this person thinks. I mean, he has a disconnect from reality. So he's not going to debate anyone. He is only going to go to places where people are already predisposed to receive his wisdom. And clearly he doesn't have any. So this is the problem. We have a gullible person who proposes these ideas of BDS and starts to support them. And he's not about to get into an intellectual debate because he doesn't have the capacity for it.
I agree. And the other thing that happens, there's an audience, obviously, for most of his speaking engagements, and it's filled with people who support him because he does a lot of them on college, university campuses, and we know how poisoned that community is against Israel. And I've spoken to people, and at one time asked, I wasn't, was in Massachusetts. I talked to a student about going there and asking some questions, but the truth is it's a scary environment. It's a scary environment to stand up and challenge him on the floor. Plus, I have seen him, like when he did a conversation with the New York Times about music. Someone asked him about Nick Cave going to Israel, and his response was so kind of milquetoast and all I want is peace, and so you see him when he's challenged in that situation where he'll walk back. But if you put him in a crowd of supporters, he lets it all hang out. And Gerard is right. That's where he travels. And I don't think he would ever accept that. And if I were him, I don't blame him. And have you seen his videos? I have posted a few of them on my website on Liberate Art. And he's getting more and more kind of curmudgeony and ruffled. He does these videos in the morning, sometimes in his bathrobe, and he sounds a little disconnected. He talks about the Jews of Israel as being aliens, meaning extraterrestrial aliens. He's you look at him and he does not present that well, especially in an impromptu situation. And I can't imagine if he was against someone who really knew their stuff. I don't think he'd have a chance, and I think he knows it. He likes those forums. And the other thing I wanted to add to in this discussion, how much power we have with this man, because this man has a very, very thin skin, and it makes him crazy when people call him an anti-Semite. It makes him crazy. He's so defensive. He talks about it all the time. The first thing he likes to do is clarify, what I'm saying is not anti-Semitic. And then, of course, what follows is incredibly anti-Semitic, like accusing, apparently he did not get an interview before his Toronto concert with the Globe and Mail. And he posited that he said, why do you think that happened? Who do you think is behind it? And I love it because the interviewer said, well, something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, well, before we get into conspiracy theories, so certainly I got the feeling that the interviewer agreed with me, which was he was insinuating that the Jews were behind this. He accuses the entertainment industry as having it out for him, which is clearly absurd. As we've discussed, he is thriving as a performance artist, well, as a public entertainer. He still packs them in. So to say that the entertainment industry is a Jewish cabal or infer that and is keeping him down, we have so much power. If we call him out, he cannot keep his eye on the ball. He's very easy to distract. Let's put him on defense. Let's call him out for what he said, what his actions are, and let the world know that his comments are anti-Semitic.
Which is what we're doing here today. So thank you all.
Yes.
Ian, Sir Paul has performed in Israel several times. Paul Anna performs in Israel often. Would a documentary that features famous people in Israel be of value? Somebody wants to know.
Yeah, look, that would be good actually, because all the artists who go to Israel love playing there. They're treated well, and the Israelis are notorious for being huge music lovers of all types of music, and it's just a great place. So that would be good. Getting back to what Lana's saying, I agree. He doesn't have thick skin. He's easily rattled. I mean, when I did the film, he was calling my name out on stage, having people threaten me. And look, as I told his people, I've been to this rodeo many times before, and in the name of truth, the truth hurts. There's no way I was going to back down. And again, just to repeat, being the son of a Holocaust survivor, and hear him say just one line, that Israel's worse than Nazi Germany. Enough said. I have never heard a more false statement. And yes, I agree with Lana. He's easily rattled and shaken, especially when you call him an anti-Semite. He says, you can't call me an anti-Semite. I say, yes, I can. You are an anti-Semite. And that is the way to stop this once and for all, because although we can say we're making headway, still he's on stage profiting shamelessly. And again, in the name of 6 million plus people, innocent people who were murdered, I respectfully just cannot sit back and let him make such disparaging false statements. It's just completely unacceptable.
To the person who asked that question, I think it's a beautiful idea, and I would love to see Ian make that film. I think we need empowerment. We need a message of empowerment. We need to show the other side of it. It's not just about addressing Roger Waters and all of the other activists who engage in BDS. It's about showing, you know, we need positivity. We need to change the focus away from being on the defensive and saying, no, this is unacceptable, this is an attack on us. It is. And we need to fight that battle in the courtroom. We need to fight that battle on the streets, but we also need to change the narrative. One of the things, love it or hate it, the Abraham Accords sidelined the whole Palestinian-Israeli dialogue. They're normalizing relationships. They're showing you don't have to look at things in the same old way. You can have peace, prosperity, and a good standard of living by changing the way you frame the issue. And it's important to have these voices, the artists that do perform in Israel, the artists that do support Israel. We need to showcase them. We need to show that this is what normal is. And that's what helps voices like Roger Waters be less and less heard. Because if you have a video showing 20 of the top performers in the world performing in Israel, supporting Israel, speaking about their love and support for the Jewish community, then that one guy who flies a pig at his concerts, he becomes the nut job that no one wants to be around. So it's very important to have that message of positivity, and I would love to see that movie.
So Ian, you have your next assignment.
Absolutely.
I think all right, so we're all in agreement. Cheryl, great idea. And when artists go to Israel, that's exactly what they say. Now, what we do see that there are clips everywhere, by the way, at news conferences, press conferences, after or before the concert, where they're saying wonderful things about Israel. So that I have created 200 memes with little snippets from that. So it exists, but no one's put it together. There's something about putting it together, because otherwise these little tidbits go away. And one of the things I do in my newsletter is I let people know which artists have stood up for Israel, and there are many, and I consider just even going there in the face of all of the horrendous flack that they get, sending them thank you notes. You can do that on social media, and you can also do it by writing their representatives. And what I do is I provide that contact information in my newsletters. And if you don't think that counts, you're wrong. I know it counts, and we need to increase our numbers. So it's not just the people here on the panel and our hosts that are at the center and empowered to make a difference. It's everybody who is tuned in to this Zoom panel. Everybody, we all have the power if we raise our voices. We have to do two things. We have to support all of the artists who say positive things about Israel, who stand up and condemn BDS. We have to support them, literally. And then at the same time, we have to point out for the small minority of artists who traffic in Jew hatred and or calling for the boycott, we have to point out the Jew hatred and anti-Semitism in their messaging. What are they saying when they echo BDS's false charge of Jews stealing Arab lands? What is that? That harkens back to the classic Jew hatred, the anti-Jewish trope about greedy, thieving Jews. There's no difference. And we have to point that out and let them, and it works when you do it. They backtrack, they give a second thought to what they're saying. So positive reinforcement and calling people out when they traffic in anti-Jewish racism. And that's the key, and everybody here can make a difference. No matter who you are, you can all make a difference. And that's how they started. That's how they started. So we can do the same thing. We're just as powerful.
It's true, Lana.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, Ian, I didn't mean to cut you off. Actually, there was a question about your documentary.
Okay, I
Um,
just want to add one thing to what Lana said.
Of course.
He's also tried to deter athletes from going to Israel. And I mean, there was a soccer team, I think it was Argentina, that didn't go a few years ago. Then they went finally. But this inspired me. I was offered, I'm an avid tennis player, and I became the chairman of the board of the Israeli Tennis Project a few years ago. And I've been the chairman of the board for a few years there. And mainly because we encourage people from all over the world, doesn't matter what denomination they're from, is to come play tennis in Israel and to learn about Israel. And all those athletes have seen my film and were disgusted by Roger Waters, and he's tried to deter some of them from playing in Israel. And we've been very successful with the athletics in Israel because they're not buying into Waters at all. And they're all coming to Israel and learning tennis, learning about Israel, other sports. So we have been successful on that part. And I really think right now, it was trendy for a while for artists to boycott Israel. So a lot of people jumped on the Waters bandwagon, but now it's the complete opposite. And I think a lot of people really realize what type of a person he is. I'm in Bulgaria right now filming something else, and his wall tour sold out twice here. And nobody here seems to have any idea. And when I have a chance on my days off, I tell everybody I know a lot of artists here. There's a huge art scene in Sofia. And even them, they're appalled that he could say Israel's worse than Nazi Germany. And they really take offense to it. So brick by brick, we're exposing this monster for who he really is, just a modern day anti-Semite. And, based on what everyone on the panel has said, some very constructive stuff, I really do think we're moving forward and exposing him as much as we can. I mean, Lana's book's fantastic and people are speaking out. So eventually we find out who everybody really is. And all that we need is just more publicity and more people to realize, hey, this is just not acceptable. And again, I have personally nothing against the guy, but I just must reiterate, to say that Israel's worse than Nazi Germany, nobody should be able to get away with that.
Agreed. So the question about the documentary, someone wants to know, there was a scene in which a psychiatrist said Waters likely identified with the aggressor behavior of his father's death. Do you remember that scene? And if so, what is that?
Yes, that was the renowned psychologist, New York psychologist. And so, excuse me, I have suffered memory loss recently, but I remember her name. So her name's Eva Fogelman, Dr. Eva Fogelman. And he lost his father. And he sort of, she says, he's sort of reliving that, but in wrong direction. And she says it's a psychological problem with him. I mean, the clip in the film clearly states that, but having interviewed, I think I interviewed her for 3 hours, and she went on and on about how he's really gone the wrong way. He should have really been on the side of Israel, but he got it confused. So there were psychological ramifications, according to her, with it. And I thought it was important to give her voice. She's a very respected medical practitioner.
I also wanted to add to that, to build on that, and to say that his dad was a well, both his parents were communists, so that's one thing. And right now, this is the BDS. Now we're facing plenty of anti-Semitism from the right, so I'm not discounting that at all, and that deserves our attention. But the BDS movement is actually coming from the left, so that's one thing. And the other thing is that his dad went and lived in, I think it was Jerusalem, but it was definitely in Israel in the late 30s, I want to say 1936 to 1938. And his dad identified and supported and was empathetic with the Arabs. And if most of us on this panel know, and I think a lot of people who are listening know, that that was a time of Arabs attacking Jews in the Holy Land. There were lots of terrorist attacks against Jews. So to the extent that his dad plays a major role in his life and his thoughts, and I don't have any personal knowledge, but if he certainly mentions him, that's another layer to what we're talking about in terms of identification. So I thought it was an interesting factoid about Mr. Waters.
It definitely is. So there are a lot of questions about, what we can do. And I think we touched upon how everybody can actually accomplish quite a bit, especially if we unite and join together. Somebody's asking why, when he's speaking in public places, we don't get together and scream liar, liar, and discredit him. Obviously not at his concerts because he's got the microphone. I would assume, I know Ian, Lana, you followed him, but how much notice does anyone have if he's going to be in a public place like speaking like this? Is this something that's common done, or is it mainly at the concerts?
No, he speaks all over the place, and he's like constantly talking about this. So that's a form of activism, and that's right up EndJewHatred's alley in terms of activism. And yes, that's what there's a very interesting experience. One of the things that BDS does is that they get protesters out in front of concert halls and sometimes in concert halls whenever international artists, whenever Israeli artists perform internationally. And it's not necessarily a huge crowd, but it's very impactful. I was in London and I went to see the Jerusalem Quartet performing there. And there was probably, 15 protesters, but they had a lot of very large, ugly banners accusing Israel of murdering children. And they were chanting from the river to the sea, Israel shall be free. Palestine shall be free. And then as you walk through, you felt like you were walking through this gauntlet and people were shouting at you, shame on you, shame, shame, shame. And it's very impactful. And people associate that with the going to see an Israeli performer. So that's not without it's not without impact. Let's put it that way. And the other very interesting anecdote to that story was the next day I was reading the newspaper, and I can't remember what it was called, but someone was doing a music reviewer was doing a review of the performance, and a full 1/3 of the review reported on the protest, even though there was only 15 people there. And the reviewer said, I don't want to misquote him, but it was something to the effect of that as he was there, he had to deal with his guilt for being there. So that's the power of public protests. And again, reviewers mention it. So you have 15 people affecting all of the concert goers. And at the same time, then again, that becomes news, and maybe not everyone initially will report on it, but eventually there will be newspapers and publications that will report on it. And plus you have material for social media posts.
Fantastic. We still have a lot more questions, but we've definitely run out of time. So I want to thank everybody on this panel and everybody out there watching. And again, encourage everyone to spread the word. If you have questions that haven't been answered, feel free to contact me at Cheryl at EndJewHatred.com. And I'd love to get some final thoughts from the three of you, if possible.
I just wanted to thank everyone who sponsored this terrific program. I wanted to thank Ian for allowing us the honor of seeing this documentary. For some of us have seen it before, and it's great to see it again and be reminded of how detailed and how much work and what a passionate work this is. And thank you for putting it together. And Lana, thank you so much for your amazing work on BDS, and your book is simply terrific, and I encourage everyone to buy it. Cheryl, thank you for moderating, and thank you for being here and such a supporter and organizer with the EndJewHatred movement. What I'd like to close by saying is that BDS is a horrible thing. It's anti-Semitic. We know this, but we need to approach it in a comprehensive manner. We have legal challenges that we can make where we can make them, but we also need to get our voices heard. It's not just about saying BDS is bad, it's about putting out our narrative. And one of the things that struck me when Lana was talking about what this experience of going to concerts and running the gauntlet, we need our voices to be heard in a positive manner too. We need to emphasize that Jews are indigenous to our ancestral homeland. It's not about oppression. It's not about challenging or countering the narratives that the other people have, but it's about expressing our identity. And this is why so many of us are so affected by this BDS thing, because it's irrational, it's illogical, it's not historically accurate. Accusing Israel of apartheid is a lie. But these lies gain strength because they're said with passion and conviction. And when that happens, people, bystanders, they don't know the facts. They look at the passion. So what we need is passionate advocacy. We need passion. We need Jewish passion to express our identity, our culture, our heritage in a way that's unafraid, to be empowered to do that. And this is why it's important to have that narrative, not just to say BDS is bad and we need to stop people like Roger Waters from spreading their false narratives. We need to have our narratives out there. We need to support the artists who support us. We need to support and applaud the politicians who are courageous enough to take a stance. But most importantly, we need to be unafraid to say that we're Jewish and we're proud, and this is our homeland, and we will never stop fighting for what is our birthright. And I think that done with passion and all the other things we can do in a courtroom, but we need to be able to be impassioned and empowered in our identity. And I thank you all so much for coming this evening and for listening to this panel.
Thank you. Lana?
Well, I'd also like to thank my co-panelists. It was a fabulous movie, Ian, and I also saw it for the second time, and every time I did, it's another layer of understanding and depth. And Gerard, you're always so articulate and passionate. And Cheryl, what a great job you did in making this all happen. I loved your questions. So I couldn't agree more. I think Gerard really summed it up wonderfully. I urge people to, in tune with what he just said, I urge people when they're talking to artists, when they're on social media and they're talking about this subject, is to talk from their heart, to talk from their personal experience, to talk about how they feel as a Jew, about their pride, about their connection to Israel, as a very positive way of communicating and not dwelling on defense. In fact, asserting their positions in a very positive manner, and this should be less a debate upon facts, because that's going down the rabbit hole, and more about emotion and how it makes you feel as a Jew or someone who supports the right of Jews to live without discrimination and not in fear. And one of the things I do at the end of every chapter of my book is I give a next step. It's a very simple thing that people can do. And when you follow along, you'll see how accessible that is to you and how very powerful you are. And we are beginning our tour, our book tour in Atlanta, Georgia. It's going to be on July 31st. We have 2 events and then another more exclusive event on August 1st. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for your organizing and support. And then after that, I'll be on tour in Miami, Indianapolis, New York, and several other places across the country. So thank you all.
Thank you. And I definitely urge anyone who has the opportunity to see Lana and hear her speak to attend. And I look forward to meeting people on the 31st in Atlanta when she comes. Thank you for joining us here. Ian, again, gratitude. I can't even tell you.
No, thank you, Cheryl. And look, I think Gerard and Lana said it all. There's really nothing left to say except, look, end Jew hatred. And in my opinion, why in this land of plenty does the joy of being fair escape many? And that's all I can say. I really learned a lot here tonight. It's been a pleasure. It's like 3:30 in the morning in Bulgaria. And really, thank you. And keep up the great work. This has been so informative and so valuable and such a good step in the right direction. So thank you so much, Cheryl, for organizing this.
I have to thank Anita, David, Andrea, all behind the scenes right now from Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation. And they're also very, very important in the End Jew Hatred movement. Israel Congregation, Jewish Resistance Worldwide, Israel Insight and Southern Jewish Living, Yad Yamin, Haru Canada, the Methods Project, Atlanta Israel Coalition, the Lawfare Project, Liberate Arts, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, Alabama Israel Task Force, AFSI, the Israel Activist Calendar, St. Louis Friends of Israel, RICI, North Carolina Coalition for Israel, Luber Synagogue, and World Harut, an Israeli committee of Sonoma County. But truly, if you're looking at the different groups on this presentation right now, I highly encourage you to follow, to support, to be a part of, because we all can accomplish a lot together, and definitely join the End Jew Hatred movement. It's the only civil rights movement for Jews, and it's incredibly important, and you don't have to be Jewish to participate. So thank you again, everyone. And Ian, Gerard, I hope you guys get some well-deserved sleep.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care.